Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office breakdown from this past weekend, which saw The Flash and Elemental come in well underneath the early projections going into the weekend, meaning that The Flash and Elemental from both Warner Brothers and Disney respectively are likely going to be the biggest box office bombs of the entire year. This is terrible news for Warner Brothers, terrible news for Disney, both of which are studios that have been struggling at the box office, especially since the pandemic started, and let's just say, couldn't happen to nicer companies. We'll talk about these and also the second weekend numbers for Transformers Rise of the Beast, which are also not looking all that great either. But before going any further, though, please make sure to smash that like button, not that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, smash the rumble button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification on. That way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So, as you can see from The Flash, $55.1 million opening weekend in the domestic market. Remember, going into the weekend, we had from Deadline, this was the official projections from the studio. They had projected initially for the film to make somewhere between $70 and $75 million. From Box Office Pro, it was the average was around $69 million. Insert your jokes here. And a film ending up coming in at $55 million. This is after, on Saturday, Deadline updated that number to be around $60 million. So this film came in underneath every single one of those projections. So a good $20 million less than the initial estimates going into it. Then you add into the fact that worldwide, this movie made about $25 or so million less than what was expected. It was going into the weekend around 155 projection. Worldwide only made $130 million. This is one of the worst performing openings for a DCEU movie that has not been impacted by theaters closing because of the pandemic, etc. But it's not even that much better when you actually compare those films in like-for-like ways. In addition to that, Elemental, I just did the numbers on this. I just looked at the chart that I've done looking at the overall ticket sales, looking at the average ticket prices as well. Elemental is now officially, when it comes to a Disney Pixar film, is now the worst opening domestic ever in the entire history of Disney Pixar. Now, again, are there some other Disney animated films or some other films that I may have accidentally missed out that may have done better or may have done worse? Is a possibility. Again, I am human and I make mistakes. But based on all of the films that I was looking at, this film, by a very far amount, is the worst performing ever in their entire history. So yes, they have clearly lost the kids. They have clearly lost the families. I can't imagine why. I can't imagine what things Disney has been doing recently that would possibly lead to this happening. I can't imagine what they've been doing, especially for the last couple of years, what things have come to light about who they're trying to target and what type of messaging they're trying to teach to kids. I can't imagine any of those things having any impact whatsoever on families and not wanting to go see and support these movies. But hey, what would I know? I'm just a guy talking to a camera. But yes, Elemental is set to be a massive flop now based on these numbers. But let's go ahead and dive first into the article over at Deadline. As it says here, The Flash falls down with $55 million opening day. And this is opening weekend. And again, these numbers are absolutely abysmal. As of the recording of this video, the site might have this number up now. But as of the recording of this video, they had not yet had their international number broke down yet. And that tells me, okay, there's clearly a lot of data that they are trying to go through. I don't know if they're going to be trying to spin this in a positive direction towards The Flash or towards Disney. To me, though, there is no way. There is absolutely no way to spin anything about these numbers in a positive light. There is no silver lining going on right now for either of these movies in any way. Going into the actual article itself, it is interesting because it seems to start off with some excuses as to why the film maybe didn't do well. It says, there are a lot of lessons to be learned this weekend, but chief among them is what it's like for a major motion picture studio to open a movie with largely a number of its cast, primarily its main star, not available to do press. Now, it seems like Tony, our good pal Tony over at Deadline, is trying to indicate that the reason why the film has failed, the reason why the film has not made any money, is because no one was doing press. Last I heard and last I checked, the vast majority of people who go to see movies aren't the type of people that are watching interviews, are not the type of people who base their entire movie-going schedule on, you know what, I need to see the star of this movie in an interview answering redundant questions, and that's going to determine whether I go to see the movie or not. No, people usually make their decision based off of posters, based off of trailers, right? Those are the type of marketing tactics that actually drive people to the theater. What this shows, what this is clear, the lesson to be learned here, Tony, is this is what happens when you as a massive studio put hundreds of millions of dollars into projects that you don't care about. When you put hundreds of millions of dollars into projects that you allow to have terrible stories, that you allow to have in the case of this movie, The Flash, the worst visual effects that have ever been put to film when it comes to a movie costing this amount of money. So again, there probably are worse visual effects out there, but when you're spending $200 million, and I don't buy that for a second as being the final production cost on this movie, there are rumors and there is speculation, there are sources apparently that some people have, close to the matter that say the film cost closer to $300 million, and that would not surprise me whatsoever. But even at $200 million, these effects are inexcusable. Just how poor these effects are actually done. So when you take all of that stuff into account, no, the lesson to be learned is this is what happens when you don't care about the movies that you're making, when you don't care about actually giving a good final product that fans are going to be able to enjoy, and what happens when you don't have good positive word of mouth. Some could say that the word of mouth on this movie is mixed. When you have a movie like this that does not have a large upfront number, if your word of mouth is not spectacular, it's game over, man. And this film absolutely is game over after even just one opening weekend. And we'll dive into why I say that in just a few minutes. But it goes on to try to say there was a big looming question, which is on everyone's minds in the wake of the Ezra Miller tabloid late in 2020 to 2022. Here's another problem, okay? Are you insinuating that all the allegations against him are just good enough for tabloids? Or are you saying or indicating that this is a reason as to why the film didn't do well? And again, I think a lot of people out there didn't go see this film because they did not want to support Ezra Miller in any way, and I can understand that completely. But what drives me crazy about this line here is that it seems to try to downplay the allegations, the very serious allegations that have been brought against him. He was even arrested. He's been brought to trial. There's other trials that are in the process of being, worked out. And so even though we have to have the presumption of innocence, we also have to recognize that he has been on camera doing a lot of very controversial things and very weird, bizarre things. And to try and say that this is simply tabloid stuff, to me, is disingenuous and kind of downplays exactly what's going on here. What we can see, though, is that they are indeed reporting that $55 million opening weekend. And for the 4-day, they only expect the film to get to $64 million. So that means after 4 days, this film will not even reach the amount of money that was made by Black Adam. Now, remember, when I say those numbers and I reference any film made in the past, I always adjust those numbers for inflation because that's the only logical way to actually have that comparison. I also do ticket prices and ticket sales as well to kind of showcase why inflation is actually very accurate when comparing these numbers. But when you are looking at this, you realize, okay, The Flash is in a lot of financial trouble. So too also is Elemental. And what's interesting, too, about these articles and what has been interesting about all these things is that look how little time they've really spent on Elemental versus what they spent on The Flash. That just goes to show you how far away Disney Pixar has actually fallen. It says, as expected, not just The Flash, but Disney Pixar's was neither Elemental was neither fire nor glamorous ice, with 29.5 million 3-day after Friday around 11.8 million, with a 4-day eyed at 33.3 million. So they expect then that Sunday to Monday to be a pretty massive drop, that Monday overall to be terrible. We always knew after the sour reviews out of Cannes that this Pixar movie about denizens in a fire and ice world wasn't going to wow. The entire concept has been hard to win kids and families. No. You again are trying to insinuate that the reason why this movie failed is because it is a new concept that people aren't interested in. But keep this in mind. There have been a plethora of new ideas and new concepts. Pixar used to be dominant at that. They would put a movie out, an original concept, an original idea, and they would be able to draw people in. So to try to argue that this is the reason why that, the plot that the movie and the trailer is saying, that's why people aren't watching it. No, why not instead you go into the actual reason as to why families, not just kids, but families are refusing to support Disney in a wide variety of ways. I'm so tired and so sick of these shills in the media running cover for companies like Disney, running cover for companies like Warner Brothers, when in reality, all you have to actually look at is the numbers themselves and realize, okay, when did all this start? It's not when Lasseter left. When Lasseter left, guess what? They were still making money. They were still making profit. So to try to argue that it's creatively a problem for them, I'm not saying that they don't have a creative problem, but to try to argue that that is the sole reason or the main reason as to why these films are failing is incredibly disingenuous and it's disgusting. Shame on you, Tony, for even trying to mention that garbage. But anyway, going back into the numbers over at thenumbers.com, we can see that again, domestically, we have The Flash at $55.1 million, Elemental at $29.5, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and this is where things start to get interesting. Remember, going into the weekend, looking at the numbers last weekend, I said, hey, look, Rise of the Beast is looking like it's going to be a massive flop. Word of mouth on the film has not been all that great. And sure enough, look at that, 67% drop from week 1 to week 2. That is a very high percent drop. That means not very good word of mouth is going on for this movie. And coming in also in its second weekend, coming in below the third weekend for Spider-Verse. This is what happens when you have a movie with good word of mouth, Spider-Verse, 50% drop in its third week of release after having a very small drop in its second week of release. coming now against the Transformers in its second weekend of a 67% drop, 27.8 versus 20 million. So Transformers Rise of the Beast is in a lot of financial trouble at this point in time, because if these drops continue, not just domestically but worldwide, it means that this film is likely going to be losing quite a bit of money, probably even close to $100 million when everything is said and done. We will continue to follow the numbers here, though, for that. But hey, I said that Spider-Verse had a very good chance of being able to beat Transformers in its second weekend, and sure enough, that is what happened. Again, it says a lot about Spider-Verse and says very little as far as, overall standards are concerned versus Rise of the Beast. Coming to the number 5 film of this weekend, Disney has yet another. It's amazing, right? In the top 5, if you look at Elemental and Little Mermaid, you're looking at $200 to $350 million in financial losses with both of those movies combined. Because in Little Mermaid, you're looking at around $100 million loss. With Elemental, based on the fact they spent $200 million on it, and the film, remember, I've done this metric before, that typically worldwide numbers opening weekend on average, and I have data back, dating back to 2019, the average of opening weekend, global opening weekends compared to total end results is that the opening weekend on average accounts for around a third of the entire box office. And so if we indeed play that out, that means Elemental is looking at barely getting above $100 million, maybe $130 million worldwide. When everything is said and done, $130 million worldwide versus a $200 million budget, you don't have to do the math on that or quick math on that to realize that is abysmal, that is awful. For a film like The Flash, coming in around $130 million worldwide, that means the film will struggle to get to even $400 million worldwide. And when the film costs $200 million projected, or at least that's what they're saying, when likely it costs closer to $300 million, yeah, you can see why, okay, I can do quick math on that to realize, yeah, that film is also in a lot of trouble. You probably have the two biggest flops of the year in The Flash and Elemental, respectively, though Little Mermaid is definitely up there as well, though it has done much better worldwide than both of those films likely will end up doing. Coming in the number 6 spot is another new release from Lionsgate, The Blackening. I've seen the trailer for it. I have not a lot of real interest in it, but hey, it's there and it's doing something. Whether or not this is going to make money or not is still a little too early to say, but we'll have to wait and see. Guardians is also still adding to its overall profits. This film is at $820 million worldwide. So, hey, $850 million is not out of the question. It'll be hard to get there at this point in time, but it's not out of the question altogether. Boogeyman is still a box office flop for 20th Century Studios, so another Disney product there. And Fast 10 also still not doing very well at all, dropping another 69% here, bleeding theaters at this point. And this film, with a massive budget, not getting it anywhere close to the break even that this needed to get. So I'll be interested to see exactly, 1, how many more Fast and Furious movies we get, and also, 2, how much money they're going to put into any future Fast and Furious films, because at this point, I don't see how they can justify any of those numbers. Going into these numbers, though, as you can see, The Flash, $130 million worldwide. This is abysmal. And when you think about the numbers for Black Adam's worldwide first opening weekend, the fact that The Flash is coming in well beneath that is just, it's a joke. It is pathetic. I mean, there's no other word really to describe that. Elemental, $44.5 million. We're looking at numbers here that remind me quite a bit of the opening weekend for Strange World for Disney. We'll look at that in the charting in a second, but let's just say that means this film is in a lot of trouble. I would not be surprised if they threw that on Disney Plus very quickly and pulled this out of theaters, because, I mean, when you're making this kind of money and you're likely going to have another massive flop another massive drop in weekend 2, because I'm not really hearing anything about this movie, and that's also terrible. It's bad enough when you have bad word of mouth. When no one's talking about you, that's also pretty bad too. So looking at this, I would not be surprised if this film doesn't even break $100 million by next weekend. And let's just say that will be a death knell for this project. Spider-Verse getting very close to $500 million. So I think that's absolutely going to be a very likely number. I think that overall could end close to $600 million when all is said and done. So that's very good numbers for that movie, especially on a $100 million budget. Rise of the Beast at $274 million worldwide means this movie is in a lot of financial trouble. Little Mermaid also still be in that financial trouble. $465 million means that, hey, even if the film does get to $500 million, and that's still an if at this point, guess what? That's still well beneath the $600+ million it needs to make to break even. So that's why many people are looking at this saying, okay, yeah, this film does not have a good chance of coming anywhere close to it, and in fact likely to be $100+ million of financial losses. So we have The Blackening here with $6 million. Again, a film put out for Juneteenth, which is very odd and bizarre. I think it says a lot about the commentary and the thoughts that they have about the audience they seem to be going for versus anything else. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, $820 million. Again, very strong numbers here for that film. Boogeyman at $51 million, pretty bad. Fast 10, though, may not even crack $700 million. And yeah, I mean, just again, look at the comparison here between international and domestic. When you're making, again, it's about a 1-to-5 ratio here between the two. That's not good. That is not good, especially when the domestic is as low as it actually is. Going into the actual box office charting, as you can see right here, Elemental, all right, $44.5 million. That means right now it's only made 0.2 times its budget. To break even is roughly 2.5 to 3 times the budget. So at 0.2, after one weekend, that is not a good start. 0.6 for The Flash, so really not all that much better. Transformers: Rise of the Beast after 2 weeks is at 1.4 times the budget, so that's why this film likely will end up flopping, especially if the drops continue, and with competition continuing to build at the box office as the summer goes on, that is likely going to continue. Spider-Verse is still well on its way to making and adding to its profits at 4.9 times its budget, and a film like Fast 10, for instance, at 2 times its budget, still a far cry away from where it needs to be if it's going to hope to break even. Again, $340 million production budget for that movie is absolutely insane. If we look at these numbers, though, as you can see, the break even for Elemental is around $500 million, the production budget of around $200, and The Flash's break even points around $550 million, and that's based off of a budget around $220. And again, I know that there are rumors out there, and I know that there's speculation the film costs closer to $300+ million, and that would not surprise me one bit. But even the reason why I still hold to these numbers is because even if these numbers are true, right, even if this film did only cost $220 million, that still puts it in such a terrible financial state. Because if this film is going to be lucky to break $400 million and it needs to make $550 million, you can see why. This film looking at $150 million plus loss for Warner Brothers, if no one gets fired after that kind of a loss, especially when a lot of people were saying, including, the new head of the DCEU, James Gunn, he was saying this is the best film ever in the DCEU. If this is the best film that they have and it's going to be a massive financial loss in addition to being a terrible movie, oh boy, we have a lot to look forward to, I guess. And then same thing also with Elemental. If no one's going to get fired over this film, when you're seeing, again, abysmal numbers here, then I don't understand the world. The world's already a very confusing place, but it becomes even worse when you start to make comparisons and you start to actually look at the financials of these movies. Again, there's no excuse anymore. There is no pandemic excuse at this point, and these are just bad numbers. So let me go ahead and see if I can actually find the worldwide numbers for Strange World. So Strange World's global opening weekend was at 27.8. So, okay, we're not quite at those numbers, but still, a 44 million versus a 27 million, especially when you remember that the ticket price has risen quite a bit, even since Strange World came out, means that the films really aren't too far off from one another. Looking at the actual ticket sales, as you can see, again, Strange World is not on this chart. I don't think it was a Pixar movie. I could be wrong on that. I think it was a Disney animation project, but again, take that with a grain of salt. I got the list here from thenumbers.com. I put in specifically Disney Pixar films, and these were the films that actually got put on the list. And so if that is not on there, then obviously that number could possibly change. But looking just at the domestic numbers here, Elemental, the worst ever opening weekend for a Disney Pixar movie domestically. 2.4 million tickets is right now where we can likely say the opening weekend ticket sales ended up. That's even 2 million below Lightyear. And we all know Lightyear had an abysmal opening weekend of only 56 million domestic, right? If 56 million domestic was already a terrible opening domestic weekend for a film like Lightyear, I mean, when you're looking at 29.5 domestic million, 29.5 million domestic for a film like Elemental, this is catastrophic. And if you go ahead and just look back in history, even a film like The Good Dinosaur, which was the first flop from Disney Pixar, still had 4.6 million tickets. So if, again, you want to go back to that Deadline article and how they're trying to make excuses as to, well, the reason why, the film is failing is because the story, right? It's because they're running out of ideas, because the writing hasn't been good. But again, I don't remember the exact time when last year got thrown out, but I believe it was somewhere between 2016 and 2017, and you still had movies like Incredibles 2 at 20 million tickets, Toy Story 4 at 13 million tickets, not that those films were any good, and then you had the pandemic films. So here's the other thing too, remember this, all right, Onward was the week before, it was the weekend before all the US theaters closed, so there already was the talk, there was already the fear out there about everything going on with COVID. That film still had 4 million tickets sold. So if you want to, again, see how bad Elemental's opening weekend truly is, the fact that it loses to Onward's opening weekend says quite a bit. So abysmal numbers going on for that. Going now also to talk about The Flash and just how bad these numbers are. $55 million opening weekend domestic. All right, that puts the film well below Shazam's opening weekend. All right, 5 million tickets for that movie. You see that it's slightly above Birds of Prey, right, at 38 million, but keep in mind the ticket sale. 3.5 million tickets were sold for Birds of Prey. This film directly impacted by the pandemic also. Guess what? The Flash had less than 1 million tickets more than what that movie did. Oh boy, that ain't good. That's not good at all. Coming in well underneath Black Adam, 6.4 million tickets, adjusted for inflation. Opening weekend was $75 million. And Shazam 2 made $30 million. So yeah, it did a little bit better than Shazam 2. But again, you're still looking at what, 1 million or 2 million extra tickets being sold for The Flash. And remember how much more money was put into The Flash, not just production budget wise, but marketing budget wise, how big The Flash was supposed to be. In the grand scheme of everything DCEU, this was supposed to be the reset, right? This is supposed to be leading the way for the upcoming films that James Gunn's going to be having. Oh boy, these are abysmal. These are awful. These are some of the most atrocious numbers that I have seen. There's a reason why, as to why going into the weekend, there was talk that this could be the worst summer box office that we've seen in quite some time. Based on the numbers that we're seeing right now, yeah, that is very likely going to be the case. The last film that I want to talk about in any detail is going to be Rise of the Beast. I know some people out there are fans of the film, but based on the 2-week number that we have now, it's now projected these are based on historical standards, so the vast majority of films fall into this range in some way. That means the film worldwide is going to end somewhere between 392 and 549. Since a 68% drop has already happened, getting to twice its 2-week number is not likely going to happen. So you're looking at a film probably getting closer to that 70% minimum. So that means that this film, it has a chance of getting to $400 million worldwide, but in all likelihood will not actually reach that. And that puts this film probably getting to, if not a $100 million loss, then maybe a $50 to $100 million loss. And either way, it is not looking good for that. All the while you have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is still adding to its overall profits. So kudos to them for making a successful movie. Boogeyman is still a flop machine, and About My Father is still a flop. Little Mermaid also still a financial flop as well, though it is looking like it'll be performing like a normal movie. And obviously this is going to be because of the domestic and not the international sales. Fast 10, because it costs so much money, is set to be a financial flop as well. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, again, $820 million worldwide. This film right now is still performing as a normal film would, probably going to end somewhere around that 60% of the first 2 weeks compared to its end result, which would mean, hey, yeah, this film has a chance of possibly being able to catch Wakanda Forever, but it still has a long way to go as far as the number of weeks. This film, if it's going to hit it, it's going to hit it by the last weekend that it's out in theaters, and this film does not have a lot of weekends left, so there's a chance, but it's added another 10 million or so between last weekend and this weekend, which is the reason why it's a possibility, because if those kind of holds continue, you could see this film get to 830 million by the end of next weekend. And so the question then is, how much steam does it have left? Clearly, it's had enough to at least break even. Even if you have a 3 times multiplier for your break-even point, it's still gotten to that point. So the question is, how much profit has it made? And ultimately, that's going to be a question of how you actually break your numbers down. But those are the numbers as they currently stand. So what are y'all's thoughts about The Flash? Again, the fact that this movie has done so horribly, so terribly, that it's likely going to be a $150 million flop for Warner Brothers. If, again, someone's got to get fired. If no one gets fired for that, I don't know what's going to happen. And then for Disney, too, how they could possibly justify continuing on in their Disney Pixar movies. And remember, they still have major releases, but Warner Brothers and Disney still have major releases they have yet to come out. And the metrics for those movies and the projections for those movies are not looking good, right? The MCU is not in a healthy state for the Marvels coming up, right? Warner Brothers is not in a healthy state for Blue Beetle. If The Flash is going to open, and The Flash is a well-known name, you have a lot of attention surrounding this movie, years and years in the making. How do you think Blue Beetle's going to do? With a brand new character that most people, unless you've read the comics, have no idea who they are. Yeah, you have some name recognition with the lead star being from Cobra Kai, but I mean, yeah, let's just say Warner Brothers and Disney still continuing to be the biggest box office failures year in, year out, now several years in a row. But let me know your thoughts about any of this stuff I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, that 5-minute Odyssey, smash the rumble button as well. Also, please make sure to check out the link in the pinned comment to Makeship, where you can get yourself your own Templar Odin plushie. I think I'm about 10 or so away from hitting the goal in order for these bad boys to be put into production. So please, if you have not gotten one yet and you're interested, check out that link in the pinned comment below. And thank you again in advance if you have already gotten one. So you guys are all great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my June Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off first with Patreon, Father Luca Illich, Jaimir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check it over at his YouTube channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel of Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel by the same name as well. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. And again, thank you all very much for being my supporters. If you want your name shout out at the end of every live stream and every video, check out the top link in the video description below. You also can get access to things like a giveaways channel where I give away Blu-rays, 4K steelbooks, all kinds of stuff every single, most weeks in the month. I try to give away something, or at the very least towards the end of the month, I will make it up with several giveaways. Basically, most people are guaranteed to walk away with something at the end of every single month. So if you want access to that, again, check out the top link in the video description below, as well as access to an exclusive podcast. This past month, I was actually able to record a great podcast with Michelle from Force of Light Entertainment. So if you want access to that and also a plethora of other content, check out the link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.